When Margaret Davis lost her husband, a piece of her heart went with him. At 66, the retired schoolteacher found herself adrift in a sea of grief. Her son, Brian, and his wife, Emily, offered her a lifeline. They invited her to move into their sleek, modern home in a quiet suburb. Margaret packed up the memories of her old life and stepped into theirs, hoping to find comfort and a new sense of purpose. She had contributed a significant part of her savings to their down payment, a gesture she believed would solidify her place in their new, shared future. It felt like the right thing to do, a way to stay close to her family. But the house felt less like a home and more like a museum. Everything was white countertops, cold steel appliances, and abstract art that Margaret couldn't quite understand. It was so different from the cozy, book-filled home she had shared with her husband for over 40 years. She tried her best to fit in, to make herself useful without being a burden. She would pick up the children from school, do the dishes without being asked, and fold laundry until her fingers ached. She wanted to be a help, not a presence. But she always felt like she was tiptoeing around the edges of their perfect, polished lives. The silence in the house was often the loudest sound. Margaret would try to start conversations, sharing stories from her past or asking about their day, but the replies were often short and distracted. Emily would offer a smile that never quite reached her eyes, a polite but distant kindness that made Margaret feel like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. She felt a profound loneliness settle over her, a quiet ache that she couldn't share with anyone. In this house, surrounded by family, she had never felt more alone. She missed the easy comfort of her old life and the husband who understood her without a single word. Her days fell into a quiet, lonely rhythm. She would spend hours in her room, a space that felt as sterile as the rest of the house, surrounded by boxes she hadn't fully unpacked. They were filled with books and old photographs, relics of a life that felt a million miles away. She longed for the familiar scent of old paper and the warmth of shared memories. Instead, she was surrounded by the cool, impersonal design of her son's world. She was trying so hard to be the person she thought they wanted her to be, but in the process, she was starting to forget who she truly was. In early May, Brian and Melissa announced they were going on a week-long couples getaway to Hawaii. They told the retired schoolteacher how much they trusted her to look after the house and the kids. As a parting gift, they left her a bottle of Merlot on the counter. "You deserve to relax, Mom," Brian said, giving her a quick hug. But as they drove away, a subtle feeling of unease washed over the retired schoolteacher. Something about their reassurances felt rehearsed, a little too smooth. She tried to shake it off, telling herself she was just being overly sensitive, and settled in for a quiet week alone. The first night, as she was getting ready for bed, a tiny flicker of light caught her eye. It was coming from the corner of her bedroom ceiling, a small, insistent red blink. She stood on a chair to get a closer look, her heart beginning to beat a little faster. There, nestled almost invisibly against the white paint, was a tiny pinhole lens, a camera, a hidden camera in her own bedroom. The air left her lungs in a rush. It felt like a violation, a cold intrusion into her most private space. Why would they do this? The question echoed in the silent room. A chilling realization dawned on her. If there was one, there were probably more. Fueled by a mix of fear and a new, steely resolve, the retired schoolteacher began a methodical search of the house. It was a horrifying scavenger hunt. She found another camera in the living room, cleverly disguised as a motion detector among a row of fake books on a high shelf. In the kitchen, a sleek, modern timer mounted above the refrigerator held another lens. Her hands trembled as she continued her search, feeling as though the very walls were watching her every move, recording her every breath and sigh. The discoveries kept coming, each one a fresh stab of betrayal. There was a camera nestled inside a light fixture in the dining room, another hidden within the hallway thermostat, and even one on a shelf in the laundry room. The whole house was wired. Her home, the place she was supposed to feel safe, was a stage, and she was the unwitting star of a show she knew nothing about. Every corner she turned, she imagined another unblinking eye following her. The sense of being constantly watched, judged, and recorded was suffocating, and the trust she had placed in her own son crumbled into dust. Ordinarily, Melissa's home office was kept locked, a private space Evelyn was never invited to enter. But in their haste to leave for Hawaii, they had forgotten to lock it. With a deep breath, Evelyn turned the knob and the door swung open. The room was just as neat and organized as the rest of the house. Melissa's computer was on the desk, left open on the desktop. Evelyn's eyes were immediately drawn to a folder ominously named Footage. With a click of the mouse, she opened it, and her world tilted on its axis. Inside were dozens of video files, all neatly dated from every camera in the house. Her life for the past several months was laid out before her in a grid of digital files. There she was, making coffee in the kitchen, reading in the living room, and crying quietly in her bedroom. They had captured it all. Another folder labeled Clips contained shorter videos, each tagged with cruel clinical labels. Weird comments, muttering to self, crying again. It was a collection of her most vulnerable moments, edited and categorized like a science experiment. The humiliation washed over her in a sickening wave. She felt exposed. Her grief and loneliness turned into a spectacle for their private viewing. Then she found the most damning file of all. It was a video of Melissa on a video call, laughing. "She still doesn't realize she's on camera," Melissa said to the person on the other end of the screen. "It's honestly a little sad. I think we could actually cut together a short documentary. We could call it Portrait of the Forgotten Matriarch." The words hit Evelyn like a physical blow. A documentary. They weren't just watching her, they were planning to package her pain and sell it as entertainment. This wasn't about her safety, it was about exploitation. In that cold, sterile office, Evelyn found more evidence of their calculated deception. There were invoices for a custom remote monitoring package and project logs titled House Data, filled with notes about her behavior, like emotional tone, nostalgic. She even found a binder containing a data sharing agreement Melissa had signed. This was a premeditated project. A cold fury replaced her shock. They had not just invaded her privacy, they had attempted to steal her dignity. But Evelyn Bennett, the quiet retired schoolteacher, was not going to be a victim in their story. She was about to become the author of her own. With a clarity she hadn't felt in months, Evelyn began to fight back. She didn't scream or break things. Instead, she acted with quiet, deliberate precision. She took a flash drive and copied all the video footage and the damning documents from Melissa's computer. She printed out still images of herself captured by the cameras, crying, sleeping, lost in thought. She then unplugged devices and subtly moved decorative objects to block the camera lenses, blinding the unblinking eyes that had watched her for so long. She was taking back control of her space, one small act of defiance at a time. Next, she mailed certified copies of the photo evidence to herself, creating a postmarked record of her discovery. Then, she sat down in the living room, looked directly into the camera she knew was hidden among the books, and recorded a 10-minute video of her own. She spoke calmly and clearly, not with anger, but with a powerful, reclaimed dignity. "I have always been more than you chose to see," she stated, her voice steady. She detailed the betrayal and the pain they had caused. She sent a link to this video to her personal email and to a trusted former colleague who was now a family law attorney. When David and Melissa returned from Hawaii, tanned and smiling, they found the printed photos spread across the gleaming kitchen counter. The smiles vanished. David tried to downplay it, to explain it away as a misguided attempt to ensure she was safe. But Evelyn was no longer the timid woman who tiptoed around their home. She met his excuses with the cold, hard facts. She confronted them with the truth of their documentary, the labeled video files, and the data sharing agreements. Melissa, furious at being caught, accused Evelyn of snooping. "You invaded my privacy," Evelyn replied calmly. "I simply documented it." With her lawyer's help, Evelyn laid out her terms. Her substantial financial investment in their home was to be repaid in full, with interest. They would also provide a stipend for her relocation, remove every single surveillance device, and provide a formal, written apology. Faced with legal action and the undeniable evidence of their cruel project, they had no choice but to agree. A few weeks later, Evelyn moved into a charming one-bedroom cottage with a blue door and an ivy-covered fence. In her own home, surrounded by her books and memories, she finally found peace. She was no longer a forgotten retired school teacher. She was free.